My ex wants to reconcile with me, but my ex and I divorced late November of last year. I would share why, but it's a super long story. Just know that it was really messy. Anyways, he came back a month ago, wanting to reconcile. I asked him kindly to give me time to consider things and then US time to rebuild and take things slowly if I decide to proceed. However, he's giving me ultimatums stating that he wants to get back together sometime this year soon, or he'll just get engaged to someone else. But he'll propose anyway, just to give me the opportunity to remarry him. Like a WTF. I just came out of a whole marriage with him. I'm not looking to remarry him or anyone else in the near future. I'm just super confused as to why I'm being rushed to reconcile with him. I would be more receptive to start all over and build everything back up. However, this is a huge turnoff because I'd like to be able to see real change from him, then make a sound decision. You updated. My ex-husband and I spent time over the weekend and we were having a conversation. Then he mentioned that I need to do exercise if I want to be his wife. I cannot remember what we were talking about exactly, but I responded out of annoyance. I'm not trying to be a wife. From that point on, I noticed his demeanor changed a little, but not so much, and we carried on with the day as normal. He went home later on. The next day, I had to work. For context, after 5 months of complete silence from him and no financial support for our daughter, he came out of the woodworks, begging to be a family again and promising to step up to the plate and take care of his financial responsibilities, including child support and much more. We agreed to him paying for our daughter's daycare, which is $120 a week until I started working. Then we'd go 50-50, along with his $264 court-ordered child support that was supposed to go into effect May 1st of this year. So yes, back to the story. The next day I had to work. He never sent the daycare money, which he usually does the night before. I heard nothing from him. Thank God I work from home, so I was able to kind of manage work with my daughter at home. But barely. I blew his phone up all day. He finally responded and told me that he will no longer be paying for her daycare anymore because he pays child support and because I have a job now. I asked him, what does that have to do with anything, and told him that I have yet to receive the child support and that he should have a bit more compassion because I'm just now getting back on my feet. He then told me that it wasn't his problem. He's done what he's supposed to do. I told him that as a parent he should want to do more than the bare minimum, to which he responded, what our child's name gets from me is from child support only, that's it, unless she's with me. I responded, well, $264 a month isn't sufficient, and you were financially absent for 5 months up until the point where you decided to re-enter our lives. He then responded, that's not my problem. I immediately cursed him out and blocked him. There will never be another US. You all were right. He wasn't sincere with his intentions. Second update. Now that I'm out of the relationship with my ex, I can see that his logic is just not logical and nothing he says and does never makes any sense. Our marriage was very hot and cold as well as our now co-parenting relationship. He will go months without responding to any of my calls, texts about our daughter. Now, all of a sudden, he's being nice and active in her life for now. He dropped her off from school the other day and stated that I looked good, he loved us both, misses his family, and continuously insisted on me hugging him. The next day I called and asked him what exactly he meant by all of that the other day, and he said he never said I looked good and that he doesn't know what I'm talking about and that we should just focus on being co-parents. So then I told him to stop playing his twisted games and to respect my peace. He said okay and that he didn't mean to hurt me. Well, this was 2 days ago. Yesterday and today, I just refocused and continued to live life. Didn't contact him about anything. Then he calls me tonight stating that he's checking on my daughter and I, which he never does. It's just so weird. I'm still healing from him, although I still somewhat love him. So this kind of set me back. Anytime I'm doing well and not worried about him whatsoever, he pops up. I am sorry that Oop has to an awful man like her ex. I wish the Oop and her daughter all the best. Story 2. Aida for making my pregnant wife cry by calling her less of a person. This all boils down to my wife's father. I have a 6-year-old son that started living with me as his primary guardian when he was 3 and his mom went back to school. I met my wife through work, and I also met her father, who worked at the same company in a higher role than both of us. My wife knew I had a son, but I said I wouldn't introduce them unless we became a serious couple because that wouldn't be fair to him. When my wife did meet my son, they got along really well. I invited her and her father over for dinner one night, and her father met my son for the first time. He was weird and awkward around my son and made strange comments about his appearance. His mom is black. I confronted him after the dinner, and he made some pretty pathetic excuses. After that, I asked him to not contact me outside of work matters and asked her for space. A couple weeks later, my wife told me she had completely cut her father off for his beliefs. Our relationship became stronger than ever. When we got engaged, she said she didn't want her father at the wedding. We ended up both transferring to other companies. As far as I knew, he was gone from both of our lives for good. My wife is pregnant and due in a month. She has already started maternity leave and has been looking for a new job to start after maternity leave because she doesn't want to stay at her current company. Yesterday, she sat me down and told me her dad got her an interview for a job at our old company. She also told me she has been talking to him for a couple months and wants to know how I would feel about him knowing our future child. I told her the truth. I told her I felt betrayed, and I felt like she betrayed my son, who she claimed to think of as her son as well. I told her that she would even ask me that makes her less of a person in my eyes. She started crying and asked me what kind of insensitive jerk would call the woman pregnant with his kid less of a person. I told her that was how I felt, and although the language was harsh, I felt it matched what she was asking for. After cooling off, I'm now unsure if my word choice was warranted and wondering if I was an a-hole for speaking to her that way while she is pregnant and more emotionally vulnerable. I could have just said I wasn't okay with what she was proposing without insulting her character. Relevant comments. I never put it, edit, cutting off her father, as a condition of our relationship, which may have been my mistake. My intention when I realized he had those beliefs was just to break up with her. However, when she came to me and told me that she had decided to cut her father off, I really admired her strength of character to do that, so continued the relationship. When she said she wouldn't want her father at our wedding, I assumed he was a non-issue I wouldn't need to worry about. Maybe I was naive. Give her an ultimatum. I'd leave her, but I'd never give her an ultimatum. I think that's wrong. If a relationship needs ultimatums, it's already over. If she really wanted to have a relationship with him and it truly was important enough to her, I would tell her I want an amicable separation. I hope we can work out a fair custody arrangement, and I would leave. I think an ultimatum is like telling her, if you talk to your dad, I'll leave you. I am telling her I feel betrayed by her decision to talk to him, but ultimately, it is her decision, and if she wants this, I can't stop her as she's her own person. I'll just have to do what's best for my children, and separate my oldest from her while trying to be there for the baby as much as I can. Does wife have other family? She had her sister, aunt, and cousin, but she is no longer speaking to them after a situation where her cousin went to prison. She said he needed to accept the consequences of his actions, and her sister and aunt cut her off. She has a lot of friends. Yes, both mutual friends and friends that are just hers. Basically, when he met my son, he said I wasn't expecting that and asked is his mom in prison, which is so ironic. He asked me if his hair had ever been washed and if I was worried about him going to school on top of a bunch of other ignorant poop. After the dinner, when I confronted him, he said it wasn't his fault because no one had prepared him and I didn't seem like the type to mix with that sort of company. Was feel remorseful? No, she didn't say anything about him being sorry. It's only the baby she suggested him having a relationship with. If she'd suggested him having a relationship with my son, I would have left then and there. Oop is voted nay. Update. Title, Couples Counseling didn't help. An honest discussion did. My wife and I went to couples counseling. When we called to book, there was one counselor that had a last-minute opening and the rest had long waits. There was a reason for this. If you ever need to book a therapist, don't book the one with immediate availability. Anyway, so we went this morning. First and foremost, the therapist would not listen to us as we tried to explain why we were there. So much time was wasted because she kept insisting on talking about and asking about topics that weren't what we needed to talk about. My wife and I both repeatedly tried to explain the issue, and the therapist kept saying the surface issue is rarely the problem. It's the issue underneath that. It took half an hour for us to get her to actually address what occurred. When she finally listened to us explain what happened, she said flat out that I was wrong. My wife was right. I need to apologize for what I said and accept that her dad would always be important to her and had a right to be in his grandchild's life. I'm pretty sure therapists are supposed to be a bit more neutral. Anyway, she could tell I was irritated and asked what I was feeling. I said I felt deceived. I felt deceived. I felt like my wife pretended to be someone, and now I'm meeting the real her. My wife started to cry, and the therapist said my answer was unproductive. I asked my wife, "What about you? How do you feel?" She said she felt lost. She said she felt lost. She said she's lost her family one by one because they did things she couldn't accept. Realizing the child she was carrying would never know her biological family upset her, and it made her wonder if her standards are too high. The therapist jumped in and said it's important to meet people where they are out, and cutting people out isn't the answer. The therapist ended things saying we had a lot of work to do but could fix things. When we left, my wife said she was very opinionated for a therapist. I agreed. She asked if we could go get brunch and just talk, and I agreed to that too. We talked. I apologized for the way I spoke to her. She apologized for keeping secrets from me. I told her I would never be okay with her dad being part of our kids' lives. She said she understood. I also said I thought it was a bad idea to go back to the old company, but ultimately that's her choice. She said she was going to tell her dad that meeting the baby isn't on the table and then see his reaction and go from there. I thanked her for telling me. She asked me if I was thinking about leaving her. I was honest and said I had thought about it, but that wasn't what I wanted. We both got very emotional. She asked if I loved her, and I said yes. I asked if she loved my son, and she said yes. I asked if she loved my son, and she said yes. I asked if she thinks she'll love the baby more, and she said no. She hesitated, but I'm trying not to read into that. I feel we made some progress, and we will continue to work on our relationship without the terrible therapist, and try to be our best for each other and the children. Story 3. Aida for leaving a vacation I planned for my GF after her friends came along. My GF, Sarah, 29, and I am 28, have been dating for 5 years, and I wanted to go on a vacation with her to celebrate. I planned the trip for several months. Of course, I shared my plans with her and decided on skiing, snowboarding, or winter activities in company. The activities seemed perfect, and I was looking forward to this for months because I wanted to propose to her at the end of the trip. 5 days before the trip, Sarah dropped the ball on me that she invited 2 of her friends to meet her there. I was upset because I wanted to spend one time with Sarah for our anniversary. I feel like it was plain and clear that this was a trip for just us. Even though I expressed my concerns, Sarah insisted that her friends already made plans to come and won't back out. I decided to accept this because there was no way for me to force her friends to not come. I wish I fought more on this. I figured we could make some changes to our plans and I would still be able to propose to her privately. Sarah essentially blew me off for her friends, and we didn't get any private time. After 3 days of being in second place, I decided to leave the trip and head home. I told Sarah why I was leaving, and she was upset. She told her friends about my decision, and I was ganged up on. They said we were all having a great time. She thinks I'm being a jerk for making her pick between her friends and me, even though her friends weren't invited in the first place. I never had personal issues with her friends prior to this trip. I never made Sarah pick between me or her friends because everyone needs friends outside of a relationship. I'm at home now and thinking about everything. I have a day to myself before Sarah comes home, so at least I get to relax a bit. Sarah and her friends think I'm overreacting and think I ruined the trip. I think Sarah was disrespectful and rude to me by ruining the purpose of this trip and having her friends gang up on me. Aida for leaving a vacation I planned for my GF after her friends came along. Edit. This was a planned anniversary romantic trip. I was clear that we have plans for just US 2. We've been on other anniversary trips together without her friends there. We did discuss marriage beforehand, so it's not like a proposal wouldn't been out of the blue. Relevant comments. Pixbady5 commented. Dinfo. Is it possible she knew you were going to propose and did this intentionally to avoid it? Oop replied. That is what worries me. We discussed marriage beforehand and everything seemed great. This was a planned anniversary romantic trip, so the nature of it was plain and clear. Dubious people pleaser commented. Tenta, does she do this often? Does she pick time with her friends over time with you? Balance is fine, but she needs to pick you for more than things like your birthday. Does she often make you feel like the odd one out when hanging with her friends? A good partner tries to include you. Does she often railroad you like this? She was so wrong in all the things she did, but that's not the big red flag. People make mistakes and learn from them. Her denying that she did anything wrong is the return the ring behavior. She will never change her ways so long as she sees nothing wrong with what she is doing. If you do dump her, then she will start crying and claim she will change. She will change for a month and snap right back. Oop replied. You're unfortunately right. She never had personal beef against her friends or family, but I was lying to myself for years. She has picked her friends over me when I wished there was more balance between us. I never canceled plans with her just to hang out with my friends, but she has done that to me more than once. This trip was just the biggest stunt she pulled with her friends. Oop is voted NTAG. Update 1 and 2, made in the same post. Minor update. My friends are here at the house, and they have been running potential interference, just in case her friends try to bombard and harass me. They've been great, and I'm so glad to have them. Minor update 2. None of Sarah's friends came by the house or harassed me last night, which is good. Sarah hasn't come home yet. I figured out what I want to say and have it written out. Update 3. From the bottom of my heart, thank you to everyone who sent me kind words and encouraging private messages. I decided that I wanted to end this entire relationship. I packed my important belongings, passport, clothes, and arranged with my best friend to crash at his apartment until I can find my own. Usually, when small issues happen in a relationship, it ties into a bigger issue of that relationship. The main reason why I decided to break up is because I realized that her friends will always be closer to her than me. Sarah has favored her friends over me and blown off some of our plans for her friends more than once. I was lying to myself for years because I didn't want to face reality yet. I had hoped she would change, but this trip really opened my eyes that I will always be in third place to her. I expressed my feelings multiple times, and Sarah promised she would change, and she didn't. Sarah came home late yesterday. I said, I have a lot to get off my chest, and I want to get through my notes before she talks or tries to interrupt me. The first question I asked Sarah was how she thought the trip went. She said we all had fun, and it was memorable. I shouldn't have to feel like the third wheel in my own relationship, especially on a trip that I planned. My next question was, why did you invite your friends in the first place? You knew this was an anniversary trip for us. She talked about the trip with her friends since the beginning, and they never been to company. She thought it would be a good idea to allow them to come just so they can have fun in co with us. I followed up with my lack of knowledge of her friends coming along until days before. It's one thing if they came and did their own activities, but it's another thing that every activity became a group activity. I signed up for a monogamous, not poly relationship. My last question was, did you know that I was going to propose to you? Sarah said she didn't know at all. The thought never occurred to Sarah that I was going to ask. She claimed that she wouldn't have invited her friends to come along if she knew, but I responded that it would ruin the surprise if I told you. Sarah begged me to stay with her and believes we can work everything out. She didn't want me to throw 5 years away after this one bad trip. I listened to her promises to change for years regarding her friends, but nothing happened. I ultimately left Sarah with this. It's clear that there isn't enough room in your heart for your BF and your friends. As much as I love Sarah, I can't stay in a relationship where I'm not respected enough. I left Sarah in the house by herself and I drove off to my friend's place. I'll figure out how to get my name off the lease, and I'll plan to get the rest of my belongings. As for the ring, I will return it this weekend. Oop replied in a comment. Yeah, I had much more information in my post, but the character limit was too high. Part of the reason why she stayed back was because I said I wanted to go home alone and think. I know that couples shouldn't storm off after a fight, but it was kinda important to separate for a bit to gather my thoughts